Okay, I'm Leila Cruickshank. I'm from Cole Publishing. We're a new digital startup. We were funded by Starter for Six about a year ago, and we've just launched the first instalment of a serial book. As we're talking about the digital publishing landscape, I want to give you some examples of things that people have been doing and new ways in which people have been dealing with digital. So one of the big ways is apps. There have been some absolutely brilliant apps designed by people like Faber. Their solar system app is, it shows you the whole solar system as a picture. I would have liked to have a video of this, but I know that whenever I put videos into PowerPoints, they don't work. So I thought it would be a lot safer just to explain it to you. You can touch any of the planets, zoom in on it, you get extra information. If you don't want to know about a little moon, you don't have to see it. It's a brilliant way of getting people to identify what they want to know about and be really interactive in the way they do it. Their Shakespeare app has readings from famous Shakespearean actors, which you can integrate along with reading it. So as you can see, that'd be very useful if you don't know how something's pronounced or you're not really understanding it. It's a lot more helpful if you can hear someone read it out. It also brings in all the notes, explaining to you what the words mean and where the words come from, which is extremely useful in an education format and also for your general reader now. Nosy Crow are doing something very similar with children's apps. They're very interactive. You can click on things, you can get extra things to come up. So far, apps have been fairly successful for certain elements of interactive storytelling and educational purposes. For more general fiction, there have been some choose your own adventure and audience participation books. Scottish Book Trust have recently been doing a experiment where they get people to suggest where the story is going to go. And I have seen some choose your own adventure stories. Now, the problem I think with these is that when I used to read the choose your own adventure books a long time ago, I always wanted to know what all the endings were going to be. So I would go back and read them all again, which may or may not be a bad thing. For audience participation, one of my things is that I'm quite happy reading the book. I don't really want to be inputting to it. So while I think the apps are a great thing for non-fiction, travel apps are very, very useful. Lonely Planet are doing a great job of making their ebooks and their apps work very well with all the abilities that online has. But at the moment, I'm still not exactly seeing how to integrate all this interactive possibility with novels, and I'm not sure I've come up with a very good example of that so far. I think interaction has to be useful to the reader, and when someone's just telling you a story, it's not always that useful. So the other really big change for publishing over the last few years has been ebooks. Keith's talked a bit about the different formats and DRM. So I'll just say that at the moment, it's a problem for publishers that there are two different formats. It would be easier for us if there was only one standard format that everybody used. And about DRM, I will also say that Cole are releasing their serial sections as DRM free. This is mostly to allow us for people to download them more easily, put them onto whatever device they want, because one of our things is partly portability, but it's also making things as easy as possible for people to access our work. And at the moment, it's not as easy as it could be because of the problem of the cost of apps. So we have not been able to develop our own app. We're using ones that people already have. So if we can make it easier for our work to get onto those apps, we want to do that. The value of ebooks and enhanced books has also been touched on a bit. Publishing has traditionally charged more for hardback rather than paperback content. We have established a precedent where people expect to pay more for a more expensive edition. But that's all to do with the packaging. It's nothing to do with the actual content. Publishing now is trying to encourage people to go for enhanced ebooks or apps, which they can add content and hopefully add value to, although there is also a worrying trend for apps to become cheaper and cheaper. Keith also touched on the fact that people expect ebooks particular to be cheaper than print books. And one thing, although he gave a very good explanation of why they're not, with editing and all the other things that have to go into a regular book, he didn't touch on VAT. What I find is that a lot of the cost that you would spend printing and then distributing a physical book, especially when the customer pays for their own post and packaging, is actually taken away from ebooks by the government. We don't pay VAT on printed books, but we do on ebooks. So actually the cost difference to a publisher is not that different. Ebooks, on the other hand, are absolutely great for interacting with customers because people can get them straight away. And they're very much here to stay, and I agree with Keith completely that there is no way people are going to stop reading them or that publishers are going to stop producing them. Just this last week, Amazon announced that they're selling 114 ebooks to every 100 print books. It's an interesting figure because not that long ago, maybe 6 months ago, it was that exact number, 114 to 100, that they were selling more than paperbacks. And I find that very strange. Do they wait until it's the same figure? Is that just a nice, handy, round number for them?
Are they telling the truth about their figure?
Yes, exactly. Are they telling the truth? So, coming on to pricing, which I've touched on a wee bit before, we've seen 20p ebooks, we've seen completely free books, we've seen both self-publishers and normal publishers putting books on either for free or at very low prices. This is it's very difficult for anyone to make a living when you're selling your content at such low prices, and I don't think it's sustainable. So I think there's got to be a way to bring that back, or to try and bring that back, so that people can get some money back for the loads and loads of work that everybody puts into producing books, and that's the authors as well as the publishers. I expect everyone's heard about the agency problems and where Amazon fits into this, and it's all to do with different formats, different models of selling books, and who sets the price. I'm not going to talk about that in any great detail, though, if anyone wants to ask questions about it later, because there is so much going on in the news about it. Just this last week, Digital Book World have released a new ebook chart, which very interestingly shows that the main 25 ebooks being sold are around about the $9.99 mark, and they're also mostly sold by the very big traditional publishers, Penguin and Random House and the rest. There were perhaps 1 or 2 self-published books in that list, and they were all priced at what I think is a reasonable price of about £5. I think this shows that people are starting to realise there's a difference in quality between published books and self-published books. Perhaps not exclusively. I'm not saying that a self-publisher can't produce a really professional work. I'm saying that people are starting to look, in the great sea of ebooks, are starting to try and find ways, what am I trying to say? Ways of trusting the person they're buying it from. It's about reputation, and it's about the brand that you've built up. And I was going to, the last point was really just the same one about enhanced ebooks. You can try and charge a bit more for than plain text ones, and it's about the perception of the value of the content that the buyer has. Okay, self-publishing is also a big challenge to traditional publishing, but maybe not in quite the same ways as you might think. You could see it as self-publishers have moved the traditional publishers' slush pile onto the internet for everyone to look at. That's one way of looking at it. There have been some successes. Self-publishing has been supported by a lot of different platforms, particularly Amazon's self-publishing platform, where they get 70% of the royalties. Now, for places like Amazon, they don't care whether they sell a lot of books for one author or a lot of authors selling a very few books each. It works fine for them either way, and I think people should be a lot more careful in just putting content out there. If you put content out there and then you try and take it to a traditional publisher because you haven't been able to sell it, the first thing they're going to ask is, well, how many copies did you sell yourself? We're getting submissions in where somebody has put it on Amazon for a few months and has sold 10 copies, and they're saying, well, we think you might do a better job. It's like, yes, but you've already released it and no one was interested, so they've got themselves into a tangle there. Self-publishers see this as bypassing the gateways that traditional publishers have set up. That's one argument. I might not share it, but I do think that some publishers have very narrow focuses on what they might want to publish. And some authors are also perhaps expect there to be more of a market for the book than anyone else would perhaps see. Publishers are using self-publishing as a way of finding other income streams for themselves, so they're not just letting it all happen. They're doing this by either selling services to self-publishers, such as editing and marketing, or they're using it as a way of crowdsourcing new talent. 50 Shades of Grey and, in fact, the Amanda Hawking books, and a lot of the books that have become very famous as self-published successes have been picked up by traditional publishers and then made a lot of money for the traditional publishers. And that is working quite well for the big houses. I want to talk about some of the platforms that have been brought up to support self-publishing, because this is where I think it's been really innovative changes in the digital landscape. And I think there's been more innovation in some ways in this angle than there has been in traditional publishing. Some of these are platforms where the writer can put their content online and get a lot of feedback on it from other writers or from readers and then go and sell it. Some of these are Wattpad, which Margaret Atwood has a story on at the moment, Book Country, which is run by Penguin, and Jotify, where people can get feedback and then they can later go on to sell. Community is a big word for the digital landscape at the moment. We've talked a little bit about publishers trying to develop their own communities, and I'll come on to that in more detail later. But some of the very successful communities have been writing communities, such as the ones I just mentioned. There's also how these go about trying to monetize them for the author. I think it's very difficult when you've put content online for everybody to look at to then go on and actually sell it, since you've already given it away for free. So you could say that traditional publishers and marketeers are making some money out of writing communities, but our authors are actually making much money out of these. And do they still need a traditional publisher to come and help them take the book in another format back to these communities? Reading communities are also big news online. There's general blogs, there's also things like Goodreads and Readmill, which are social networks for reading. Anobi, which is a similar one, and Small Demons, which I've described as 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, because it's an idea where you select a certain part of your book. It might be that it's set in a particular country or a particular town, and then it will suggest other books to you that are set in that way, in the way that you can start a film night and theme it around one particular actor, and you might watch all things from that actor. You might say, well, actually they acted with this person in another film, so we're not going to watch that other film. It's the same idea for books. Publishing communities. Unbound has been a really famous one. It's interesting because it's mostly been a bit of a mixture between a traditional publishing idea and online version. For the traditional publishing idea is that they select the people who put the content up, and it's also largely famous writers who have been successful with this. And the writers pitch an idea and people pledge money against it so that they can produce it. This also harks back to a very traditional model of publishing hundreds of years ago, when people subscribed to a print edition before the publisher went and produced it. Robert Burns's writing was made available that way. Traditional publishers are talking a lot about building online communities, and one of the things is that it's actually extremely difficult to get people talking about it. The publishers that are doing it at the moment are largely broadcasting content. They're not really finding ways to interact. You could, for instance, put text online, but there's that problem of if you've put it up for free and people have commented on it, can you then sell it to them afterwards? There's also a copyright issue there, and the contract issue. Would the author want you to put the text up for free to get people's feedback? Can you actually crowdsource editing or anything like that? And so far, nobody's really doing it in publishing. I've a note here of another way of doing publishing communities, and that is talking about branding and how publishers can build up a community that is actually more about curating good content that always goes back to the same audience, as opposed to just trying to keep tabs on everything that they're doing. I think that going back to the question of pricing and how people are coming back to paying a little bit more for their ebooks to get a traditionally published ebook, publishers a future for them is really to do with setting up a brand that people recognise and believe in, and so they know if they go back to that person they'll get a really good book. That's where Cole comes in. That's really where we started out. We wanted to talk to the same people again. We started this from a social media point of view. We'd tried promoting things through social media where in a traditional publishing house where you were talking about hill walking one day and trying to sell a children's book the next, or maybe poetry. And you were always talking to a different group of people, and it didn't really work very well. So we wanted to talk to the same people again. We wanted them to trust us and come back to us if they wanted something similar the next time. We also want to try out new digital ideas. So at the moment we're doing a serial version of our first book. We've released it DRM free. We're trying to do added value sections like video content and author interviews online, well, in real time so that people can talk to them. And we're trying to make it a social experience where people come and chat to each other as well as directly to the author. And we're talking about branding and personality and trying to build up a trust factor in our community. And we're also promoting publishing and what that does, why that's important, why having a book that's edited and produced professionally is better than one that wasn't. And also getting people to understand publishing, because I feel that publishing has set itself in such a position that people see it as the big scary corporation who tries to take everyone else's money away. And that couldn't be further from the truth with most of the people I've ever worked with who really loved books, got paid very little, and didn't really get a lot back apart from their job satisfaction. So we wanted to talk about all the different things that goes into publishing and why people get really passionate about it, why you would rather earn 15,000 a year than you might earn 30,000 perhaps in a different, you could be doing something using the same skills for a big corporation. You would earn a lot more, but a lot of people still want to work for the small places, earn a lot less. And we're trying to build an online community with Cole that uses customer interaction and also brings us a better understanding. One of the things that publishers have let go by selling through e-tailers like Amazon is their digital sales data. And it's going to be extremely difficult to build up an understanding of our customers without that. So if we can draw people back to our own websites by offering them more and a better experience, then we're going to build up a better understanding of them through that data.